Hi, we've already looked at what makes a fossil potentially useful as a zone fossil, but there's a little bit more to it than that. With the evolution of life on Earth through geological time, we see different groups of fossils evolving and then becoming extinct at different times. Equally, the diversity of those fossil groups will vary over time. Sometimes we find fossils perhaps only in one small geographical area rather than having a global distribution. So, when we're thinking about which fossils to use, we need to look at um, the distribution of them uh, in time and also around the world. Now, to do that, we're going to use this diagram. Um, you have a copy of this diagram on page 9. I'm afraid it's in black and white. Uh, Attached to this lesson, though, you should find a colour version of this, which you're welcome to use, or if you want, you can print out and stick into your booklet. It's up to you. I should also explain that in your booklet I've used the old spelling of Cainozoic. I've used the British spelling, and fairly recently it's been decided, sadly, that it's the American spelling that we're going to use. Hence the difference. You might want to change it in your booklet to the modern spelling, which is Cenozoic. Okay, there's a series of questions. Question 6 on page 9. What I'd like you to do is use this diagram, particularly perhaps the colour version will be easiest to use, to work out the answers to each of those questions. So press pause now and have a go at those. Okay, let's see what you've come up with. So we have our diagram here. You can see that there are some groups that are extremely useful and others much less so. For example, the um, echinoids, they're sea urchins. They're only really useful for a small part of the Cretaceous period. The rest of the time, we barely use them. Anyway, question 8 asks you which two fossil groups you might use for the Cainozoic. That's the bivalves and the foraminifera. Foraminifera are tiny microfossils. We'll talk more about those later on in the course. You can see that both of those are important for worldwide zoning in that particular era. If we're zoning the Triassic, just regionally, so that might be within, say, a continent, we're going to use the brachiopods and the bivalves. The two groups that are least useful for worldwide zoning, it's the corals and the brachiopods. Perhaps regionally they might be useful. I know, for example, the corals are used in Britain to zone the Carboniferous, but worldwide they have limited use. Question D asks which fossil is the most useful for the Ordovician and Silurian. That's the graptolites. And graptolites is one of the groups we're going to study in some detail about how we can use it as a zone fossil. And the group then that's most useful for dating the longest period of time is the ammonoids. That includes the ammonites, but it's not just the ammonites, as we shall see, because that's the other group we're going to look at in some detail. Now, this idea has been around for a long time. This is, you might remember us talking about him in Theme Zero. This is a guy called William Smith, who just over 200 years ago used this correlation of fossils that he found on his travels around Britain to come up with the first geological map that had really ever been drawn, and a geological map that really does stand up really quite well in comparison to the most recent geological map that you can see on the left here, produced by the British Geological Survey. The main structures, the main patterns that we see on that modern map, we can recognise on William Smith's map of 1815. He even managed to put these rocks together in a sequence. That particular cross section, that slice through the ground, goes from North Wales down to London. So, as we look at the sunset over Lyme Regis, a place famous for its fossils and the dating of the rocks that we can achieve because of that fossil content, we can see that different groups of fossils are useful at different times through geological history. The Cambrian period, for example, is dated using the trilobites. The Carboniferous in Britain we can date using corals. But the two groups that are the most important are the graptolites and the ammonoids. And it's those two groups we need to look at in a lot more detail in the next couple of lessons. I'll see you then.